All right, let's just get right into our Davis chat for professional identity. So we'll be going through chapters 1 and 2 of your Davis text. Please have your text in front of you because I will ask you to be, looking at things, highlighting things, marking areas that I talk about. I'll promise you this: if I talk about something on a video, it's because it's important and you should highlight it and write it down, or one or the other, right? So please have your resources in front of you. And as we go through this chapter, these are the things that I want you to come away with at the end of this lecture. So make sure that you can answer these questions. So you might want to screenshot this, write down these questions now so that as you go through the lecture, you'll be able to answer these questions. And the things that we're going to ask about nursing. So we've talked about we need to identify this professional identity, or we need to grow this professional identity. But first you have to understand what it means to be a professional and what it means to be a nurse and what that looks like. And so we're going to dive into the idea of professionalism, the idea of what is a profession and what defines a nurse and who are we. So it's kind of the who, what, when, where, why of nursing for our Davis chat. So we're going to talk about who are we as nurses? Where did we come from? What does nursing look like today? How do nurses think? How do nurses grow? How is nursing practice regulated? What are some important nursing organizations that I should know about? What kind of areas or contexts do we work in, and who do we work with? So if you can answer all of those questions at the end of this video, then you'll be good to go. So we'll start with who are we? So we are both a professional and a nurse, and we need to define what it means to be a professional, and we need to define what it means to be a nurse in order to really have a sense of this. So what is a profession? Again, this is table 1.2 of your Davis. Remember, down in the bottom corner of your video, you'll see where this is coming from in your text. So a profession is a standard formal education, and it has a systematic body of knowledge. There's a code of ethics that guide it. And as a profession, we demonstrate that we have autonomy both and accountability within our own profession. So you have to have organizations and structures and guidelines and standards in place to demonstrate that you as a profession have autonomy and are able to self-manage all of those things. And the American Nurses Association, which is an important nursing organization that you should know about, defines nursing as the diagnosis and treatment for human responses to actual and potential health problems. So I think maybe it's easier to define nursing if we talk about what our purpose is. And our purpose of nursing care is to help promote health, to prevent illness, to restore health, and also to provide end-of-life care. So where do we come from? Many of us will hear stories from our grandparents, or my grandpa loves to drive my kids around on a tour of where his old farm was, where he grew up, and we go to visit him and just, look at the old barn from the road and talk about all the stories that he had as a child there. Because I think when we understand where we come from, it gives us a sense of grounding of who we are. And that's the same for our cultural background and family background, just as it is for who we are as nurses. So Davis' text has a brief synopsis of our nursing history, and you can pause this video at any time and kind of read through the specific history of nursing, but the gist of it is that really the nursing profession as an entity really only started in the 1800s. Before that, nursing care was just done by family members in the home. And over the last couple hundred years, nursing has developed from a grassroots thing of a lady on the front lines of a war just trying to do well by the soldiers and provide good health and healing to them, into a much more established organization or profession with educational standards and universities that have helped grow our profession along the way, along with professional organizations and even legislation that helps guide who we are as a profession. So we're just going to take a quick video to see where we've come from and how we've gotten to where we are now as a profession.
During the Crimean War, more soldiers died from infection than in battle. until a nurse introduced sanitary practices still in use today. When the scourge of polio hit the world, it was standard practice to strap down and immobilize patients, until a nurse discovered that movement and physical therapy had far better results. In the 1950s, jaundice was a leading cause of infant death, until a nurse found that a few hours of sunlight could actually cure the condition. At the dawn of the AIDS epidemic, no one knew how the disease spread, so patients were kept quarantined and alone, until nurses defied convention and embraced them with compassion. During the Ebola outbreak, the disease was thought by many to be too contagious to treat, until a student nurse used what she had on hand, garbage bags and duct tape, to protect herself so she could care for others. And cerebral palsy robbed many patients of their ability to speak, until a nurse gave them back their voices. And I will always be grateful to her.
So nurses have come a long way in the last couple hundred years, and you are joining the ranks of an incredible profession. At the end of this video, under the optional section and under professional identity in your Blackboard, there is a quick 2-minute video on the impact of nursing, battling the COVID pandemic, and the innovation that nurses have come up with and risen to during the pandemic. And I would encourage you, if you have an extra 2 minutes, to watch that as well. So we know kind of where we've come from as a history of nursing, but what does nursing look like today, and how do we practice? So nursing today is something that requires a lot of skill and a lot of attributes of communication and teamwork and leadership and professionalism in order to manage the very fast changing tech forward healthcare setting that we now practice in. But at the end of the day, there's 3 main attributes that guide the way nurses work today. And those 3 ways that we work are with our head, with our hands, and with our heart. And those are all equally important in how we practice. And so we care, and that's how we do what we do as a healer, is providing nursing caring to our patients. We do with our hands, we do bed baths, and we take vitals, and we give medications, and then we think. And nursing thinking is an incredibly important part of what we do as a nurse because of the ever-changing, ever-expanding and evolving, fast-paced healthcare system in which we work. And so actually in our 110 course, we're going to be going into great detail on how do you think as a nurse. And it's so important that you learn this, that we're spending an entire semester course on how to think as a nurse. How do you do critical thinking and clinical judgment as a nurse? But for today, we're just going to touch on this very at high points. So when you're reading your Davis chapter 2, don't get too bogged down in this chapter. We're just trying to give you a quick overview of the fact that critical thinking is a very important aspect of what we do as nurses. And in your slide, I will point to some of the more key parts of chapter 2 that you might want to focus on. So how do we think? Well, here's how critical thinking looks for nurses and why it matters. So critical thinking, here's kind of the gist. Here's the Cliff Notes version of your chapter 2 in Davis. Critical thinking is a vital component to nursing practice. It's defined as reasonable and reflective thinking focused on deciding what to believe or to do. And it's important because nurses deal with complex, ever-changing situations every single day. Clients are unique. And nursing care is holistic. So we're not just thinking about the medical diagnosis, but we're thinking about their psychosocial, and we're thinking about their spiritual health, and all these other integrated processes that we think of when we provide nursing care. And so you have to provide good critical thinking to be able to address all of those things and provide holistic care. For chapter 2, just go ahead and skip through pages 34 through 36. It provides a critical thinking model as an example, but we are going to be learning a different model in 110 that will be what I would like you to carry through your nursing program. So just for now, go ahead and skip over those pages. What I do want you to focus on, however, is the nursing process, which starts on page 36 and goes through 38. Now, the nursing process is how we organize our thinking as nurses. And on your end class exam, it will be asking you questions based on this process. Now, a lot of people think of the nursing process as an acronym of ADPi. I don't know if that's a great acronym, but healthcare loves acronyms, so you might as well get used to it. If you really wanted to go more deeply into this, certainly your book describes more about the nursing process all the way from chapter 2 to chapter 7 of your Davis text. And there's all sorts of different YouTube videos that you can find on ADPi or the nursing process, so you can look at those more deeply. But here's the gist of what it is. Assessing is figuring out, gathering all the data that you need to figure out what's going on. That data could be subjective, it could be objective, it could be taking vitals, it can be asking the patient how they're feeling. All of that information, it can be looking at a computer screen, it can be watching for lab results. All of that information is assessing the problem. And then diagnosing, you might want to think of diagnose/problem. They used to get really big into nursing diagnoses, which are just this antiquated language that nurses don't speak and we don't do. So no point in learning it. But what we do identify is problems with our patients. So if you think of diagnose, think about problem. And so we identify what is the problem that our patient is having, and we do that based on the assessment data that we collected, and we go through our critical thinking tool that we'll be teaching you in 110. And then we plan. So we have a problem. What are we going to do about it? We make a plan on how we're going to help this patient. And then we implement the plan. We do whatever it was we planned to do. It's nice to follow through. That's integrity, isn't it? And then finally, we evaluate. So did our implementation, did the plan and what we did it work? And how's the patient doing now? Do we need to do anything else, or are we good? And that ADPi nursing process is how you approach patient situations to determine how to care for them. If you don't know this yet, you definitely want to memorize the ADPi, assess, diagnose, plan, implement, evaluate steps. You're going to need those throughout your nursing career. So how do nurses grow? We talked about growing in our sense of being a nurse, in our professional identity, but we also need to grow in what we do in our career. And so Benner has this model called novice to expert. You'll hear it all the time in nursing education. We love all of our theorists. And it depicts this 5 stages of what it means to grow from novice to expert. And our goal for you is that by the time you graduate from Morton College nursing program, that you are at the advanced beginner stage, so that you can, hit the ground running on your first job and feel competent at a baseline to be able to provide care to patients. So you can go ahead and read through these steps on your own and what they imply. This is on page 12 of your Davis text, but the idea is a novice starts with no experience, totally new, and then an expert has a full grasp of things, has an intuitive sense of what it means to practice, and kind of just with all their knowledge and experience, just has a very deep understanding of what it means to be a nurse and can also share that with others. But I'll let you go ahead and read through the details of each of those steps in your text. And please do that. It'll be important that you know those. So how is nursing practice regulated? Well, because we're a profession and we have to have accountability in order to be an autonomous profession, we have a number of different ways that we are regulated as a profession. One of those you're already aware of, and that's the Illinois State Board of Nursing. And you know about that because you are seeking an RN license. And the Illinois State Board of Nursing, or any other state board of nursing, is the legislative body that grants nursing license. The Board of Nursing can also revoke nursing license. I had a colleague who had ended up having an opioid addiction problem and had to go through discipline from the State Board of Nursing over this problem in order to address it and restore his health and his family's health, but also keep patients safe and keep him from diverting medications. So the State Board of Nursing is what gives you your license. It can also take away your license if you're not practicing appropriately. Now, how do you know if you're practicing appropriately? How do you know if you're following the rules? Well, the rules are established by the State Nurse Practice Act. And in your Blackboard, you have a link directly to the Illinois Practice Act, which I would ask that you would review because it's important to know your roadmap and what you're allowed to do as a nurse. And so the Nurse Practice Acts, as it says on page 13, are going to define the practice of professional nursing. They're going to approve nursing education programs. Thank you, Illinois, for approving our program. They are going to establish the criteria of what it means to be a registered nurse so that you know how do you make sure that you meet all the requirements. Developing rules and regulations to provide guidance to nurses and enforce the rules that govern the education of nursing and nursing practice. So we actually have laws that are created by not nurses, but legislators in the state who govern how we practice nursing in the state of Illinois and in every other state. And then the standards of practice are basic standards. You can look at them on page 14, established by the American Nurses Association that guide the scope and standards of our practice. And so you'll see there's standards of practice and standards of professional performance. Now, my challenge for you right now is to take a look at page 14 and find something to put these on in your room, post it in your car. It is so important. These are what guide us and give us a roadmap for what we do as nurses. So you need to know these. And so go ahead and write down, that the standards of practice are ADPI, easy, assessment, diagnosis, outcome identification, planning, implementation, coordination of care. Remember, I said that coordinating of care is only written into the nursing profession's scope of practice. So cool. Health teaching, consultation, you get the idea. And then the standards of professional performance. So we are held not only to doing things, but to acting a certain way. And so things like being ethical, providing culturally congruent practice, and being good at communication. I want you to go ahead and take this table, and you can make it as fancy or as plain as you want, but put it somewhere where you're going to see it. So you start really getting in your head what these standards of practice are. So we've already talked about this a little bit, but what are some important nursing organizations that you should know? First of all, the American Nurses Association. The American Nurses Association is the official professional nursing organization in the United States. It was founded over 100 years ago, and they help lobby for healthcare legislation, both at the state, local, and federal levels. And they communicate standards and set standards of practice and our scope of practice, like we talked about on the last slide. The National League of Nurses is even an older organization, started in the 1800s, and has very similar purpose to the ANA. And then the other ones that I'd like you to focus on are the Sigma Theta Tau International. That's what you learn about in your orientation to our nursing program. It's the Honor Society of Nursing for students and beyond that you can be inducted into as part of being a nursing student. And then finally, there are all sorts of different specialty organizations to help form subsets of group identity or value specific. So I've been part of a simulation, an education specialty organization. I've been part of an emergency nursing association, and I've been part of a forensic nursing association. And all these little subsets help us build our professional identity and knowledge base and training within these little subsets of nursing. And by the way, how cool is it how many different subsets of nursing that there are? You can go into nursing and be a nurse leader, you can be in informatics, you can be a bedside nurse, you can be a forensic nurse. The opportunities are literally endless, which is so cool. You all start with the same, entry-level license, but then the world is your oyster in terms of what you take and what you do with that. You can be an advanced practice nurse and diagnose and prescribe patients. It's just endless. And I'm excited to explore those things with you. Now, we're not going to get into all those different levels of education that your book talks about for the sake of this lecture. But, you know, as you have questions about what's next for you, because right now we're just thinking, let's just, how about you're probably thinking, let's just get through 107, right? But then we're thinking about just getting through nursing school and passing the NCLEX and getting your first job. But that's just the starting line. And so, you know, I'm happy to be a mentor to you and provide you information on that as you grow and have questions about maybe what's the next steps for you. So where do nurses work? I think this is obvious, but I'm just going to run through this real quick. You can look at this slide on your own. I don't need to read it out for you, but we work in a variety of settings, all from the hospital to outpatient to nursing homes to schools. There's all sorts of different settings that nurses work in. And who do we work with? You're going to start learning some of these interprofessionals as you go into your clinical settings, or maybe you already work in a healthcare system. But it's very important that as nurses, we know who we work with, because if we're going to coordinate care, if that's part of our scope of practice, then we need to know who we're coordinating with and kind of what their roles are and their scopes are as well. So we work with people like physicians, advanced practice nurses, or nurse practitioners, physician assistants, other registered nurses or LPNs, unlicensed assistive personnel or UAPs. Sometimes they're called patient care techs or certified nursing assistants, but that's kind of the umbrella term for any of those type of workers. And then there's other ones like pharmacists, therapists. This is not even an exhaustive list. We could go into phlebotomists and lab techs and chaplains and secretaries. We work with a huge interprofessional healthcare team. I'll leave you with this slide. Nursing is not for everyone. It takes a very strong, intelligent, and compassionate person to take on the ills of the world with passion and purpose and work to maintain the health and well-being of the planet. Can you just let that sink in for a minute? If you think about it, where would the world be without a nurse? If you would ask, you know, a few people in your life today, the impact that a nurse has had on their life, I would say that our profession is one that extends all over the globe and now throughout history to provide an incredibly necessary resource and service to our community, to our nation, and to our globe. Welcome to the profession. I'm so excited to unpack this with you further in class. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.